What's up, y'all? Roy here, and you're listening to the Clemens with a Z podcast. So, I want to talk about something that's been on my mind in the last few weeks. A couple things have been happening. Um, Thoughts in my head, just experiences with churches. And one of the things is when I'm sitting in these churches and I'm observing and watching people and just thinking about all that I'm seeing and feeling, I wonder, does anyone care? Because it's not like I go to these churches and they're empty. These churches are filled. And if you look at um, any church really on Instagram or around America, you can see that they're full, which makes me wonder, does anybody care about the things that I'm seeing? You know? And not in a sense of like, does anyone care and is anybody listening? It's just, does anyone really care? And, then I was scrolling through Instagram and I saw that a brand new church is launching here, in Virginia Beach and another one. And I couldn't help but ask, you know, how many churches do we actually need? You walk into a church today and it really doesn't feel like people are questioning much. The music is polished, these sermons, they're rehearsed. Like I said a second ago, people show up, sit through it, and go home. And maybe that's just the way things are now. Maybe, I don't know. I think it might be something else. So I don't know if the question is really, do people care? I wonder if the question is, why aren't people questioning it? The truth is, I believe that we all care. We all see these things. But I think we also don't want to lose a community, don't have the bandwidth to reevaluate their entire belief system. And that's a lot. Don't want to believe they could have been wrong. Don't know where else to go. I think most people aren't walking into church with critical eyes. I think they're walking into churches with tired hearts, hoping for reassurance, peace, and something to hold on to. They don't want to question whether the pastor is right. They don't want to examine the system too closely. As they start pulling at that thread, the whole damn thing might unravel. And then what? What happens when you realize the rules you followed, the sacrifices you made, the things you gave up might not have meant what you thought they did? That's a terrifying thought, you know? So we stay. Even if it feels empty, even if the sermons don't hit like they used to, even if we feel like something is off. Because at the end of the day, believing in something, even something broken, seems to feel safer than having nothing at all. I think that's why, or that what is what keeps these churches running. Not because people are brainwashed or dumb or anything like that. I just think most people today are exhausted. They want to believe. They want the lollipop. I wanted it. That's why I've stayed for as long as I did. And if you've lived in the US for more than 5 minutes, I know you noticed this, that there are churches freaking everywhere. Like, seriously. From massive mega churches with stadium seating to tiny storefront congregations squeezed between a laundromat and a nail salon. Churches are everywhere. In fact, there are an estimated 350,000 to 400,000 churches across the country. That's nearly one church for every 1,000 people. And evangelical churches make up a huge chunk of that. In 2015, evangelical churches accounted for 55% of all U.S. Protestants, meaning their influence is massive. But here's things that's really have been setting it off, this conversation for me. Like I said earlier, I was scrolling through Instagram and I saw it. A brand new church launching here. Another one. And like, Like I said, it just seems like there's a church in every corner here. But nope. There's a completely new church setting up shop here in the city that has over 200 churches already. And it's hitting me, how many churches does a city need? Why do new churches keep forming instead of people just joining ones that are already here? What's this driving force? You know? This wasn't just one Instagram post. It was about what I'd already been seeing for a while. As of right now, there's 211 churches here in Virginia Beach. That's more than enough for every single neighborhood to have its own congregation, every little suburb, every little cul-de-sac. And yet they keep popping up. And it's not like people are struggling to find a church. Like I said, they're everywhere. So why is it that a brand new church still needs to launch here? I even saw another church in Instagram is actively recruiting new members, making a big push to bring more people in. And they're not alone. It raises this question for me. It's like, are there really that many people who still need a church? Or is there something else driving this constant expansion? Because at some point, I think we'd hit the limit, right? And yet we never seem to. And these churches aren't just in buildings, they're online and Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. Churches are using these platforms to reach people, to spread their message, to bring in new members. But they also use these platforms to control the conversation. I've seen it and experienced it firsthand because I've been blocked by two different churches here in the city simply for asking questions, raising concerns, critiquing what I've experienced. I wasn't being rude. I wasn't cursing them out. I wasn't even calling these churches out specifically. But I guess I just said and asked things they didn't like, which makes me wonder, well, why? Why can't we have these conversations? Why can't we talk about it? You know? Mhm. But it also makes me wonder, how much of church growth is about faith and how much is about marketing? Do we really want discussion or just blind agreement? Are they really growing because people are truly seeking God or because they're just really good at branding? It's really wild to think about. Evangelical Christianity is one of the most dominant religious forces here in the modern world, drawing millions of followers with its passionate sermons, tight-knit communities, and clear-cut moral frameworks. But beyond doctrine and theology, what keeps people in these churches? What makes them not only stay, but love being a part of these things, these systems, sometimes in the face of hypocrisy, control, or emotional exhaustion? The answer is layered. There's not just one quick answer. I think people stay because it gives them something they deeply need: certainty, belonging, purpose, and hope. These are things that every human craves, even if they don't admit it. At the heart of it, whether we're talking about salvation, approval, or feeling of being good enough, one truth remains. Everyone wants the lollipop. I did. I love the certainty, the belonging, the purpose, and the hope. That little prize that I was conditioned to expect from childhood, the sticker for good behavior, the toy at the dentist, the reward for patience at the bank. I never outgrew that desire. We don't, you know. We want to believe that if we follow the rules, we'll get the prize, that if we're good, life will reward us, that God sees us, and that if we're doing it just right, everything will make sense. And evangelical Christianity offers that. The ICOC offered that. And for many, even me, it feels too good to let go of. And so I think the first thing is I want to talk about is we want to be right. We need to be right. You know, there's a right way to be a man, a right way to be a parent, a right way to be a partner, and a right way to be a Christian. Or at least we're told, that. And this idea of a right way is everywhere, not in churches, but in books, social media, self-help movements, and everything we consume. Because life is confusing as hell. And we just want a way to navigate it that doesn't leave us second guessing every decision. I know I felt that way. If I was right, I was good. And if I was good, I just had to keep doing what I was doing, even when things felt off. But when life got hard, when things went wrong, I started to believing that maybe I wasn't following the path correctly. It wasn't that life is incredibly complex. No, that can't be the case, right? It was that God was punishing me for not praying enough, for not being obedient enough, for not being holy enough. And I know I wasn't alone in this. And this is what keeps so many people locked in, that belief that hardship is their fault, that they just need to try harder, repent more, get back on track, and maybe try not masturbating. Because if there is a right way, then there's also a wrong way, and they don't want to be on the wrong side of it. And here's the thing, we love knowing we're on the right side. It's comforting, it removes doubt, it's validating. We feel like we're doing life the way it's supposed to be done. It's secure. We don't have to wrestle with uncertainty in this, but most of all, it helps us make sense of why bad things happen. Because if we are right, then it also means that other people are wrong. And if they're wrong, then it makes sense that they are suffering. They lost everything. Maybe they weren't following God's way. They're struggling. Maybe they're being punished. Their life is falling apart. That's what happens when you turn your back on the truth. This way of thinking makes the world feel predictable. It means that justice exists, that punishment is real, that suffering has a reason, that people aren't just getting screwed over for no reason. And here's the wildest part. This punishment can actually feel good. I know it's crazy, but because when we step out of line, when we do something that feels wrong, being punished feels like relief. I know I felt that. It's like when you're a kid, you did something bad. Instead of holding on to the guilt, you just took the punishment and moved on. Or when you're in church, you confess a sin. Then you feel better because someone told you what to do to make it right. Punishment in this weird way feels like proof that the system works. I did bad, so I got punished. They did bad, so they got punished. Justice is served, order is restored. There's something so strangely satisfying about that, right? It's crazy, but it's true. Because if punishment is real, then it means that there are rules. And if there are rules, then there's a way to stay on the right side of them. And I think that's what we want. A system that makes sense, where everything happens for a reason, even if that reason is punishment. I also think we want to belong. Whether we realize it or not, we want to belong to something and we need people. Because life is isolating. Most of us are just trying to get through the day, going to work, raising kids, paying bills, wondering if we're doing anything right. Then comes along a church, and not just any church, one that makes you feel welcome, important, and chosen. They see you, they hear you, they want you. That's powerful, right? That's addictive. And once you have it, you don't want to lose it. Even if things start to feel off, even if you start to notice red flags, you tell yourself, nothing is perfect. At least I'm not alone. The kids love it here. Because leaving means starting over, being alone again, figuring things out on your own. And that's terrifying, right? And most of us don't have the bandwidth to figure everything out on our own. You know, like I said a minute ago, we're busy, we're exhausted. We don't have time to sit around debating about what's right and what is wrong, how to live, how to parent, how to be a better person. And I think that's another place where the evangelical Christianity steps in. It hands you a pre-packaged life plan. Follow the rules, stay within the boundaries, read this book, attend these services, don't ask too many questions. It's all laid out. No need to wrestle with gray areas or difficult moral questions. And we love that. We love it when things are easy. We want it to be. We want one pill to fix it all. Maybe 10 steps to freedom. Lay it out for us clearly. Give us a villain and a hero so we know who to root for. And then we swallow the pill, we'll follow the steps, we'll smile about it and ask for more. Because we want life to mean something, right? We need to believe that our struggles aren't random, that our pain has a purpose, that this is all leading to something. Because if everything happens for a reason, then we happen for a reason. And if nothing is meaningless, then we're not meaningless. You know, church doesn't answer the big life questions. It gives you a structure to our pain. It tells us why good things happen, God's blessings, why bad things happen, a test, a lesson, a trial, a refining fire, why we suffer, because suffering produces perseverance, and perseverance leads to righteousness. Why we rejoice, because we are in the will of God. Everything, everything gets funneled through God's plan. And that kind of certainty is powerful. Because just a second ago, I said, if everything happens for a reason, then we happen for a reason. And just like this, because if God has a plan, then we're not just accidents. If our suffering has a purpose, then we're not just drifting in this meaningless void. If everything is happening for a reason, then so we are we. And that belief, that understanding is grounding, it's validating. It tells us that we matter. And we want that, right? 'Cause even when life is cruel, even when we feel invisible, even when everything is falling apart, we still matter. And that's why people stay. That's why I stayed. Because the church didn't just explain suffering, it promised redemption. It promises us that the pain will be worth it, the trials will lead to glory. Every hurt, every injustice, every heartbreak will be made right in the end. And for some, that's the only thing keeping them alive. Because if this is all random and their pain is just pain and their suffering is just meaningless suffering, then what does it say about them? Are they meaningless too? I think about that a lot. I think I'm constantly stuck in that feeling of what does this all mean? Sometimes it's too much to bear. And so even when the church doctrine doesn't always make sense, even when the answers feel forced or inconsistent, people cling to them anyway. Because having an answer, even an imperfect one, is better than sitting in the unknown. And if the problem or the promise of ultimate forgiveness, redemption, and reward is the only thing stopping someone from giving up completely, that's how deep this goes. And I know that no one wants to admit it, but we're terrified of what comes next. Death is the ultimate unknown, the ultimate adventure. And evangelical Christianity tells us exactly what happens after heaven or hell, reward or punishment. And that binary thinking makes it easy to digest. No need to wonder, no need to fear. Just follow the rules and you're golden. Everyone wants the lollipop. Everyone wants to be rewarded at the end. And so walking away from this, right? Leaving this means losing everything. Your friends, your social circle, maybe even your family. And that's not just scary, it's devastating. And for us in the ICOC, it was more than a community. It was a family. We weren't just Sunday morning acquaintances that saw each other when we filled up our coffee cup before we walked into the service, which, by the way, we never had coffee. That was a sad thing. Well, we were in each other's lives constantly. Sunday services, midweek devotionals, Bible talks, dinners together, hanging out on the weekends, checking in on each other every day. There wasn't a part of life that wasn't somehow connected to the church. We were always together, always around each other, and our friendships weren't just friendships, they were spiritual bonds, mission-driven relationships, connections that were supposed to last for eternity. And when you've lived like that, when the church is your family, your social life, your entire world, it's easy to look past things that never sat well. It's easy to look for things that were just like this. Because leaving meant losing everything. And it's lonely out here in the real world. That's one of the hardest things I've had to accept since leaving the church, the sheer isolation of it. And we don't want to be alone out here because out here, there's no built in community, no automatic family, no weekly gatherings to fill your time to give you purpose. No one is calling you to check in. No one is setting up a lunch to encourage you. No one is telling you where to be, where to show up, or what to do. Out here, it's quiet, sometimes too quiet. And that quiet is deafening when you've spent your entire life surrounded by people who told you that this was the only place you'd ever belong. And so even when these things in the system don't feel right, even when we start seeing the cracks, we convince ourselves it's not a big deal. Because the alternative, walking away from this family that we know, that's why I stayed. That's why people stay. Even if it's weird, even if it's broken, because something feels better than nothing. In church, our church, it gave us everything, and it took everything. But I get it. I see why. I don't necessarily blame anyone for being in churches. That's not what this is about. I see why people hold on, why they look the other way, why they push down their doubts and stay in their seats week after week. Because when you've built your entire life on this place being the place, these people being your people, this being your truth, stepping away feels like stepping into nothingness. And who wants that? Who wants to start over? You know? Who wants to be the one who walks away from the only life they've ever known? So, yeah, I get it. I really do. Because even after everything, I felt it too. And one of the most powerful tools that these churches used, our church used it, I see it all the time, whether they realize it or not, is dualistic thinking. That's that black or white, either or mentality that simplifies life into two opposing categories: good versus evil, right versus wrong, believer versus non believer, saved versus the lost, obedient versus rebellious, God versus Satan, or now they call it the enemy. I don't think you can say Satan anymore. But there's no room for nuance in this system. You're either in or you're out, faithful or fallen, righteous or sinful. And that's exactly why it works. Because most people, like I said, don't have the time or the energy, mental bandwidth to wrestle with these complex theological questions or the gray areas of life. They just want to know what to do and how to do it. And dualistic thinking eliminates that uncertainty by giving them simple answers. Follow God, you'll be blessed. Disobey, you'll suffer. Parenting stinks. It's because you're not doing it God's way. Marriage is wrong, or your marriage is failing. It's because you're not doing it God's way. Do it this way. Believe and you'll be saved. Doubt it, you'll drift away. Things will fall apart. And this framework, it's comforting. It removes all the burden of decision making and makes faith feel clear cut and predictable. But here's the problem, right? Life isn't black and white. The problem with this dualistic thinking is that life is gray. It's messy, unpredictable, full of contradictions. People who do everything right still suffer. People who make all the wrong choices sometimes thrive. There are no clean lines, no simple answers, no life, no perfect formulas that will always work, because life is a paradox. You can feel deeply connected to God and still struggle with doubt. You can have strong faith and still question the church. You can leave a religious system and still believe in something that's bigger than yourself. You can be grateful for your religious past while also being angry at what it took from you. But churches that thrive on dualistic thinking can't allow for paradox. That might be why I was blocked by these churches. Because paradox requires wrestling with complexity, and that's exhausting. It forces you to sit in uncertainty, to live in the in between, where answers aren't always clear, where good and bad can coexist, where faith and doubt can walk hand in hand. That's uncomfortable. And I'm going to be honest with you, it's also awesome to be in. The more and more I've let go of dualistic thinking, the happier I've been. It's wild. But some people can't handle that, and that's cool too. So instead of that, I think churches know it, so they offer certainty. Here's the truth. Here's the right way to live. Here's the reward for doing it well. No paradox, no mess, no questioning. Just follow the rules, trust the system. People cling to that certainty not because they're ignorant, but because they're tired. They don't want to sit in the gray. They want the lollipop. you know? And it feels good to stay in these churches because it feels good to be right. Even if no one says it outright, there's an underlying sense of superiority that comes from believing you're on the right path, in the right church, doing faith the right way. I know I felt it. In the ICOC, we believed we were the only ones who had it figured out. Other churches were lukewarm. Christians outside of our system, misguided. Anyone who wasn't all in, sold out, the way we were not really serious. And even if I didn't walk around thinking I'm better than these people, I still had this eternal sense of being set apart, of knowing that we were doing it right, that I was doing it right. And that feels and felt really good. It gave me confidence. I was on the winning team. It gave me clarity. There's no doubt that you're on the right path. It gave me security. I didn't have to second guess myself. But there's also another thing that comes with believing that you're in, because it also means you're free from having to figure things out on your own. You don't have to struggle with hard moral decisions. The pastors tell you what's right and wrong. You don't have to question what God wants. Pastors already know. You don't have to stress about whether you're good enough because you're part of the group that's doing it right. That's incredibly freeing. You don't have to think too hard. You don't have to worry if you're on the wrong path. You don't have to sit in the paradox of life or deal with the weight of figuring out faith on your own. And as long as you stay inside the system, that freedom remains. But there is a cost. The second you question something, that freedom starts to slip away. The moment you start wondering if they could be wrong, the weight of uncertainty creeps in. The second you step outside the rules, you realize how much you've given up in exchange for that so-called freedom. And suddenly, you're not so free anymore. Why? Because now you got to think for yourself. That's the scariest kind of freedom of all. So you stay. We stay. Because certainty is easier than freedom. Because it feels safer to be in. Because it feels better to be right. And because nobody wants to lose that lollipop. Evangelical Christianity and churches like the ICOC work because it gives us what we crave: certainty in a chaotic world, community when we feel alone, meaning when life feels empty, hope when everything else seems hopeless. People don't stay just because they're brainwashed. We stay because church gives us something real, even if that real comes at a cost. We want things to make sense. We want things to be easy. And more than anything else, we want the lollipop. So, what if the real question isn't about more churches? What if it's about something deeper? What if people don't actually need more church buildings, more sermons, more services? What if what they really need is connection, honesty, a space where they don't have to fake it? What if the real need isn't for another launch, another Sunday experience, another polished production, but for something real? I know I want that. And honestly, since leaving the ICOC, I think I've been searching for that too. Maybe I wouldn't have said it out loud, but I feel like I've been trying to fill the hole that leaving the church left. Because when you spend so much of your life being all in, surrounded by people, living with a mission that tells you exactly who you are and why you're here, walking away doesn't just leave you with questions. It leaves you with emptiness. And I don't think we talk about that enough. We talk about the harm, the control, the manipulation. And yeah, that matters. But we don't talk as much about the loss. Because as messed up as it was, it gave me something: a purpose, a community, a place to belong. And once that was gone, what do I do with that? Where do I go? And I think that's why I noticed these new churches popping up everywhere. Because maybe we're all searching. Maybe we're all trying to fill something. But I don't know if more churches are the answer. I don't need another vision statement or another branding campaign about how this church is different. I don't need another slick promo video full of a pastor with his slow motion baptism shots and their cool t shirts, and a worship leader looking into the camera like they're in a music video. I need people who see me, who hear me, who actually want to know me. And I don't believe I'm alone in that because I still believe in community. I believe in people coming together, figuring out the big questions, searching, wrestling, growing together. That feels like a really beautiful thing. A space where you don't have to pretend, where you don't have to be perfect, where you don't have to fit into a system just to belong. That's what I wanted, and I still want it. And I know that I'm not the only one. So maybe the real question, maybe it's not about how many churches we need. Maybe it's about why we keep needing them. And so what happens when people finally start questioning? When the cracks in the system becomes too big to ignore? That's where things get messy. Because at the end of the day, we aren't just looking for a place to belong, we're looking for answers. We're looking for safety. We're looking for security. We're looking for proof that we were right to believe in the first place. Because this church is supposed to be about the truth, then why does it sometimes feel like the truth is the hardest thing to say? And so before I go, I just want to say something that's been sitting with me as I wrote this episode and been going through it. This whole episode, I've been asking these questions, pointing out contradictions, trying to get the heart of why so many people stay in these systems. But if I'm being honest, I'm struggling with this feeling that I'm just crapping all over people's ice cream. Because I get it. I get why people stay. I get why people love their church, why they find comfort in the structure, the certainty, and the community. Because I felt that too. And maybe a part of me still misses it. So if any of this felt like I was just here to take cheap shots, that's not where I'm coming from. I'm still trying to figure all this out myself. Still trying to understand what was real, what was manipulation, and what I want to hold on to, and what I need to let go of. Because at the end of the day, I don't want to just burn it all down. I want to understand. Anyway, that's where my head is at. If this resonated with you, if you've been wrestling with these same thoughts, I'd love to hear from you. And thank you for tuning in to this episode of Clemens with a Z. Your support means the world to me and helps keep these important conversations going. This episode wasn't about tearing down, it was about asking the hard questions, about looking at what we've believed, what we've built our lives around, and wondering, does anyone even care? Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But I know I do. And if you've made it this far, I'm guessing you do too. If you're someone who's been in these churches, who has wrestled with these same questions, or just has a story to share, I'd love to hear from you. I'll make a space for you if you want to come on, or if you just want to talk, I'm here. You can reach me at clemenswithaz@gmail.com, or you can send me a DM on Instagram at the Clemens with a Z podcast page. As always, if you've enjoyed the podcast, please rate, review, like, and subscribe. It helps more people find these stories. And don't forget, I'm just a channel. I ain't the source. If you'd like to support the podcast financially, you can find the link to my GoFundMe in the show notes or on the Clemens with a Z Instagram page. So until next time, take care of yourself, stay grateful, and keep growing. Peace.